You're about to enter a place where history and doubt collide, where one small step for man may or may not have happened. It was a space mission like no other, witnessed by millions, yet subsequently has been questioned for decades. In short, were the NASA moon missions humanity's greatest achievement, or its most convincing illusion yet? Let's return to the summer of '69 here on Things Visible and Invisible. It was Bart Sibrel who uncovered a 31-year-old mislabeled, unedited reel of footage that he believes provides evidence that the Apollo moonwalk was all a hoax. In fact, he claims Apollo 11 never made it beyond the Earth's orbit. In 2001, he wrote, directed and produced the film A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon, all about what he says really happened. And in light of those claims, he made headlines when, in 2002, he was punched by Apollo astronaut Buzz Aldrin outside a hotel in Beverly Hills. And Bart joins me down the line from an undisclosed location. Bart, welcome to Things Visible and Invisible.
Thank you, Sean. How's it going?
Bart, it's a great pleasure to have you with us. You are, if I may say, one of the foremost propagators of the Apollo moon hoax thesis. My first question, though, is really, where did you begin to suspect that things were not as the official narrative would have us believe?
Well, I was about 14 years old, and I saw a gentleman by the name of William Casing, who had second highest security clearance to von Braun, the rocket designer. And he said on a television program that I saw as a 14-year-old that they could not go to the moon. They still cannot go to the moon. And that they, like a poker player with a bad hand, bluffed and pretended to go. And prior to then, for the 10 years from the age of 4 to 14, I was a big fan of the moon mission. I had a virtual shrine of Apollo pictures in my bedroom that I saw every day, multiple times for 10 years. So prior to seeing that interview, I'd seen the Apollo pictures, I guess, over 10,000 times, assuming they were on the moon and being quite mesmerized by it. Unfortunately, for me, I guess, and the rest of the world who wants to believe a fanciful lie, you have to have an open mind to perceive the truth. There's a saying that God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble. And what is pride? It's simply the unwillingness to be wrong. As a 14-year-old, I was willing to be wrong. I'm just interested in knowing what the truth is. And about 10 years after that, by the time I had become a filmmaker, whose job is to make fake scenes look real, I was pretty confident that all of the Apollo pictures were taken with electrical lighting. And the smartest AI in the world, not available to the public, but was shown off at a convention, Google's neural network of 10 AIs hooked up together, just concluded what I did, that all of the pictures from Apollo through NASA have fake backdrops, which means they were taken on Earth, which means they didn't go to the moon. And as sad and kind of outrageous as that is, it ends up being the absolute truth.
Okay, well,
and I spent about $1 million producing the film you spoke of, which was actually given to me by someone who builds rockets for NASA, who knows the moon missions are fake. And he gave me the money to produce the movie as his patriotic duty to expose it.
Well, we're going to get into all of this, Bart, but you're absolutely right. I mean, the moon landings, the images that were produced for them, shall we say, were iconic for a certain generation, probably were of a similar vintage, and people saw it as, you know, at least humanity could do this, at least humanity could make it to the moon. It was sort of something at the end of the 60s which was celebrated across the world, not just the United States. So it's one thing working in the film industry, and I get that, and seeing fake backgrounds and thinking, I could maybe replicate this. There's another thing, though, taking that to another level, which you did. How did you encounter, or how did you come in touch with this person who was able to give you this footage? How did that come about?
Well, we had somebody who had connections with the White House, who was a multimillionaire building rockets for NASA, who wishes to remain anonymous. And that opened some doorways and got the attention, apparently, of a whistleblower at NASA who sent me footage that when you pop in the reel, it says do not show to the public. And it's unedited footage. Everything that reporters normally get was pre-edited. And in fact, it's the same footage over and over again. There's very little unedited footage and actually very few photographs of an actual astronaut on the moon from the first mission. There's only like 20 of them. And this footage that I uncovered about 3.5 years into the 7-year $1 million project, the film is called A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon. You can go to Sibrel.com. That's S as in Sam, I-B as in boy, R-E-L, Sibrel.com. And you can see the film on the homepage that I was producing under the theory it might be true that they falsified the moon missions. And lo and behold, 3.5 years into this project, I find footage of them faking part of the moon mission right in front of your eyes. It's the crew of Apollo 11. It's dated 2 days into the flight where they're supposed to be halfway to the moon. And we see, because this is the unedited footage, that they're still in Earth orbit. And they have very cleverly constructed a 1-foot model of the Earth, pretending it's the Earth floating in space and as if they're looking back to somehow demonstrate they're far from it. The lights come up, it's a fake Earth, and they're faking being halfway to the moon right in front of your eyes. So if they're faking being halfway to the moon, it's because they can't go halfway to the moon. They cannot leave Earth orbit. They all had identical equipment. So if your Volkswagen Bug from 1969 can't go over 100 miles an hour, then none of them could. And that's why Elon Musk says to, quote, return to the moon, it's going to take at least 30 times the fuel of the Apollo rocket, which is kind of strange. And von Braun, we have archival footage of him saying the largest rocket mankind can build can only achieve Earth orbit, and you have to first ferry up multiple trips of fuel to a fuel station, and then from there have enough fuel to go to the moon. It's exactly what Elon Musk says must be done to go to the moon. Why did he cancel? After over a decade of raising billions of dollars to go to Mars, he finally canceled it, and he said we have to practice first by going to the moon. So if they've already been 6 times, why do they need to do that practice all over again? And now all of these pieces of the puzzle are coming into place. And I showed this footage to 2 NBC News directors who agreed that it proved that they did not go to the moon. A Washington Post reporter agreed it proved they didn't go to the moon. He was told he would be fired if he printed the story, and the director of NBC News got a threatening phone call from the federal government telling him not to broadcast it. In fact, the BBC was going to broadcast the film, I think, back in 2003. And days before they were going to do so, they received a threatening call from the United States government warning them not to do so. So we have proof that they didn't go to the moon. I wish that the moon missions were real. We would have a better country and world. But the fact is they did falsify it. It shows you the degree and arrogance of the government's corruption. And unlike the Kennedy assassination or 9/11, you can change the hats on who did that and why. It's still a tragedy. This is a positive lie that people are having a hard time to give up. It's like their home team winning the world championship. And after believing it for decades, you come along and say, well, they cheated. They really don't want to hear that. But if we don't tell the truth about it, it means these evil people are still in charge.
Well,
And you can't cure cancer unless you acknowledge it. And that's what we have to do about the moon landing fraud.
and we're going to get into that. But I just wanted to take you back to the moment when you saw this footage, which anybody who wants to watch the film, A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon, it's very, very thought-provoking to say the least. But what was your first reaction when you saw that? Was there any doubt in your mind that this film was authentic, that it wasn't something to do with a training run, that it wasn't really linked to the actual Apollo moon mission itself?
Well, it's computer time stamped with an atomic clock. So it did take place 2 days after the launch. I mean, it's right there in front of you. And there are the NASA astronauts, Neil Armstrong, Michael Collins, Buzz Aldrin, identified on camera. They are in zero gravity, but they're still in Earth orbit 2 days after the flight when they're supposed to be halfway to the moon. And they're very cleverly making this 1 foot model of the Earth and turning off the lights and making it look like the Earth floating in space. But when the lights come up, you see they've faked the shot. There's even a third track of audio of the CIA telling them to fake a 4 second radio delay to make it appear that they're further away from the Earth than they really are. When I saw that, I was shocked. I mean, I was doing the film under the theory it might be true that they faked it, and I figured we'll never know. But I was wrong. I saw it with my own eyes. Two NBC news directors and the Washington Post agrees that it proves they did not go to the moon and they were threatened by the federal government not to broadcast it or publish it. And it just broke my heart. Not so much for America, but for mankind.
Yeah.
They actually did fake the moon landing. It's more historic than if they had actually gone. Do you realize that, Sean?
Yeah.
Either they went, planted a flag, came back, even though for some reason 50 years later they can only travel 1,000th the distance to the moon, or the most powerful nation on earth that claims hypocritically to best represent truth and justice falsified mankind's greatest accomplishment and then murdered their own people to keep it a secret. If that's true, and I assure you it is, one of the greatest events in human history is actually the faking of the moon landing.
Yes. No.
And until that truth comes out, it's like having cancer and not knowing. We have to tell the truth about it. Otherwise, mankind will never progress.
No, I couldn't agree more with you, Bart. I suppose when you were growing up with the space mission constantly on television, etc., we all got a little bit jaded by it. But the thought that it was actually a hoax is actually more intriguing in a way, and that's why I suppose people are so interested in what you have to say. However, before we get into the why of why this may have happened, I have a couple of questions. The first is, if NASA wanted to keep this quiet, let's say they did hoax it and they wanted to keep it quiet, why would they keep this incriminating reel of film lying around for somebody like you to discover a few decades later?
Well, no one's perfect. I was producing the film under the theory it might be true that they faked it. So the way I figured was if they faked it, they're more likely to have made a mistake the first time they faked it because they never faked it before. Most reporters were satisfied with the pre edited compilation reels to do the story about the moon landing, and even more so to show an excerpt from for every anniversary that they commemorated. I, on the other hand, was looking to see if indeed they falsified it. So I think I was the first journalist to ask for everything, every still picture, every video image, and every film image of the first moon landing. And apparently, a whistleblower at NASA heard about my investigation and sent me this footage. Maybe it was a clerical error. What was on the tape and the label and the contents were completely different. So apparently, someone put the private pile in the public pile or something along those lines. Also, it says at the head of it, once you do put in the reel, it says do not show to the public. So it's also unedited footage, which all the other footage from NASA is pre-edited, which is kind of strange if they really went to the moon. And then there's a third track of audio of the CIA instructing them not to answer NASA's questions immediately. Otherwise, it gives away the fact that they're nearby, 250 miles above the Earth in Earth orbit. They tell them to wait 4 seconds so that it appears that they're halfway to the moon when they're still in Earth orbit. And I mean, there's so much proof that they didn't go. All you have to do is logically think. Is there any technology that we have today that is better in 1969 than right now? I mean, 10 years after they blew up the atomic bombs were 1,000 times more powerful. So today, with 60 years better technology, the farthest that NASA can send an astronaut into space is only 1,000th the distance to the moon. So what they're saying is Lindbergh flew across the Atlantic in 1927, and 57 years later, in 1984, not a single airplane anywhere in the world from any country can fly across the Atlantic. And for some reason, the very best airplane can only fly 3 miles instead of 3,000.
Absolutely.
It's totally absurd just on the surface of that. If it weren't for people's emotional attachment to the glorious moon landings, for Americans' pride or for scientists' pride, they would see the lie for what it is. You can go to Sibrel.com, where I could do a screen share. You can prove the moon landing fraud with one picture. Where in sunlight, shadows are always parallel, they never intersect. And we show one picture that they allegedly claim was on the moon, where an astronaut shadow is at 12 o'clock and a rock about 5 feet away is at 9 o'clock, intersecting at 90 degrees from objects 5 feet apart. Impossible to happen in sunlight, can only happen with electrical light, which proves they're on Earth, which is what the AI just said. That all of the Apollo pictures have a fake backdrop, and it did it in direct comparison with the unmanned Chinese probe pictures of the lunar surface, which they said were real. This just came out, never made the evening news for some strange reason, because the people who run the news run the world corruptly, and they're the ones who fake the moon landing, so they're not going to slit their own throat.
Now, for anybody who's just catching up with this, Bart, there is obviously there's been debates around the photographs, the veracity of the photographs taken. Some of them seem to be too good. There's the shadows and the lights, as you said. There's the Van Allen belt and the possibility or not of being able to go through that. If you wouldn't mind, for somebody who's just coming to this new and thinking this is outrageous, would you mind just running through some of the case for the prosecution, if you like, that has been out there for quite some time now, the things which perhaps from just a scientific point of view might make people sort of question what took place back in the late 60s, early 70s?
Well, if you want me to share my screen, I can show you that one picture of the shadows intersecting.
No, just talk us through it, Bart. There's the shadows. Talk to me about the Van Allen belt. What's
go to the homepage of Sibrel.com, and you'll see a 3-minute video where we show in sunlight 2 telephone poles. The shadows run parallel. They can never intersect if the power source is sunlight. Then we show an Apollo picture that has 90-degree intersecting shadows from objects 5 feet apart. Take it from a filmmaker. That's a really close electrical light, which means they're on Earth, which is why the smartest AI, not available to the public, said that the pictures are fake. So we can prove the Apollo fraud with one picture that in a court of law cannot be duplicated in sunlight, which they claim. Then we have the logic that today, with 6 decades better technology, they can only travel 1,000th the distance to the moon. So how could they have better technology in 1969 with 1 millionth the computing power of a cell phone? With 6 decades better technology, it took Elon Musk, with 10 million times more computing power than the lunar lander, it took him 5 attempts to land a rocket vertically and 4 explosions. Attempting to land a rocket vertically is extremely difficult. It has to be done by computers, cannot be done by hand. And even with 10 million times greater computer technology and 6 decades better technology, it blew up the first 4 times. And somehow they're able to land a rocket vertically on the moon 6 times in a row. How about that?
Well, look,
You cannot have greater technology in the past and in the future. It's never happened in the history of the world where there was a breakthrough like breaking the sound barrier, flying across the Atlantic, or splitting the atom that no nation on earth could repeat it 50 years later. It's never happened because it was a fraud. And then we have an eyewitness who, as he's dying, confesses to participating in the moon landing fraud, says it was filmed at Cannon Air Force Base June 1st, 2nd, and 3rd of 1968. He was the chief of security at the Air Force's most secure base. My source at NASA, who told me it was fake, said it was filmed at an Air Force base. And then there you go.
So,
And if that's not enough, you have, the eyewitness, the shadows intersecting, the logic, and then we have this footage which you have to go and see for yourself. Two NBC News directors and a Washington Post reporter agrees the footage I uncovered of them faking being halfway to the moon 2 days into the flight proves they didn't go to the moon. It's what convinced me. So we have 4 times the proof necessary.
absolutely. So,
And I don't know. I don't know if that's not enough to convince you. I don't know what is, because I've talked to a college professor who so worships the moon landing. He says if an Apollo astronaut confessed that it was a fraud on national TV, he would still think he walked on the moon anyway. People have literally made a god out of this.
yes.
And
Well,
how ironic the ancient texts say that mankind will worship false idols, which are the works of their hands. I
indeed.
mean, come on. Revelation 9:11 says that one of the names for Lucifer is Apollo. How about that? Hidden in plain sight.
Okay. Well, look, I want to go back then, Bart. I mean, taking what you're suggesting to the why. So I suppose the question I was thinking of on the way to the studio tonight was, when did this germ of an idea, and you must have thought about this, when did the genesis come for this idea that we were going to fake the moon landings? And who came up with it? Who do you suspect thought this was a good idea?
I don't know. I do know that President Johnson was personally there at Cannon Air Force Base the first of 3 days of filming. Our eyewitness, Cyrus Eugene Akers, confessed as he was dying, the first thing he said was that he was a murderer. The military police came in to investigate who he killed at Cannon Air Force Base in 1968. When they found out who he killed, they asked him why. And he said, well, my coworker and I participated in filming the fake moon landing, and he thought it was morally wrong, so I killed him to keep it a secret because he was going to tell the public. I mean, that's extraordinary. And we have a list of 15 VIPs that President Johnson gave to this person. Only these people were allowed in to observe. Some of these people are still alive. Buzz Aldrin is on the list. Neil Armstrong is on the list. They weren't even in the spacesuits. They were just observers. And this is why I believe Johnson did not run for re-election, because he knew the next term they were going to fake the moon landing, and who knew if that would work or not. Do you understand? The president of Germany, the president of Japan was at the launch for the Apollo rocket, but not the president of the United States, Richard Nixon, literally distancing himself in case the truth came out. He shows up for the second launch after they got away with it. So somebody in Johnson's administration apparently proposed it. Johnson gave it the thumbs up, but didn't want to actually be president when they did it in case they got caught. And then Nixon, even though he knew they were not on the moon, had the audacity to say that putting a man on the moon is second in greatness only to God making the universe. If that's not a blasphemous claim that God may rebuke America about in the near future, I don't know what is.
Okay.
So I was watching recently this documentary about Robert Kennedy Jr. The moon landing fraud was filmed June 1st, 2nd, and 3rd of 1968. He was killed 2 days later on the 5th. If he had become president, and he had this reputation of being a Boy Scout, of being a policeman, do you really think that Bobby Kennedy would have faked the moon landing? I doubt it very much. So the powers that be, we know, are not Democratic or Republican, because Democratic Johnson was there when they filmed it. Republican Nixon gave it a thumbs up. So whoever controls the both political parties didn't want Bobby Kennedy as president. Johnson didn't want to have anything to do with it. And somebody, CIA, who knows, thought of the idea, but somebody did. And it's not the first time they bluffed during wartime. There was a time in World War II where they had inflatable tanks, columns and columns of them, to fool the Germans. So I guess they considered that a normal thing to have done. The CIA was full of deception.
But
We have Bobby Kennedy Jr., the son of the slain president. I'm sorry, the son of the slain presidential candidate and nephew of the slain president. He says with 100% certainty that John F. Kennedy was killed by the CIA because he was going to shut down their rogue agency. And then we have Robert McNamara admitting, as he was dying, that the reason they started the Vietnam War, the Gulf of Tonkin attack, it never happened. And Congress was deceived by the CIA, passed a law that killed 3 million people, including 58,220 of their own people. You see, so if they're willing to kill their own president, kill their own people, they're not going to have a problem faking a TV image.
okay,
You see?
so that's the modus operandi, Bart, of how it was done. But what's the rationale? I mean, even if it was the CIA who were doing this, what are they hoping to achieve by this?
Well, I think the number one reason was pride. My film at Sibrel.com, you can see for free, A Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon. It opens up with the Tower of Babel. The Tower of Babel to reach to the heavens, just like the moon landing. And Jesus said to start a tower and to not finish it proclaims yourself a fool to the world. It says, where there is pride, then comes disgrace. It says in Genesis 6, the reason they built the Tower of Babel was to show off. So Kennedy, who's not a scientist, after they put one man in space for 15 minutes, 20 days later, Kennedy sets an 8-year goal to land on the moon, turn off the engine, launch another rocket up, and to come back, which they allegedly did in 8 years, with 1 minute the computing power of a cell phone, when right now, with 6 decades better technology, they're 8 years behind schedule just to loop around the moon. So when Kennedy set this goal that couldn't be achieved, rather than humbly saying we bit off more than we could chew, they were too prideful to admit it. Now, if you get right down to it, what was the deciding factor? Was it pride? Was it the fact that they could embezzle an equivalent of $250 billion and fake a moon landing and keep most of the money to send to Cambodia or Laos, which Congress forbid? But when Clinton, president, was asked why he had the affair after denying it 20 times, he said, because I could. Because he could get away with it. Why did they fake the moon landing? Because they could. Because they're arrogant. They killed their president successfully. They started the Vietnam War successfully. And so these people are fools, the American people. Well, we can do it, so let's do it. That's really why they did it, because they're arrogant. And if we don't tell the truth about it, those arrogant people and their offspring are in charge of the government right now and will forever be, unless we tell the truth about the moon landing fraud, which is actually the very best tool to get rid of corruption, to show the public. Nothing will anger them more than to know they were taken for suckers 6 times and that their hard-earned money was used to not only deceive them about the moon landing, but to murder people to cover it up. It's not my opinion. It's the opinion of dead astronauts' relatives who told me they were killed by the CIA for not cooperating in fraud in the Apollo program. So that's what's going on. Does anybody care?
Well, tell me what you have been for at least the last 2 decades, if not more, talking in this way. What has been NASA's reaction to you?
Well, NASA largely didn't fake the moon landing. Most of the people there were sincere. One of the arguments that, fanboys of the moon landing say proves they went to the moon is that hundreds of thousands of people were involved. Well, hundreds of thousands of people were involved in building the atomic bomb in World War II, but only 8 people knew what they were building. I talked to Eugene Krantz, the flight director. He said someone in the command center during a launch can't tell the difference between a quote real flight and a quote fake rehearsal flight, just a bunch of numbers going by on a screen. So if they can't tell the difference and they're in the command center, how can we, as a 4-year-old at the time, or people who are so foaming at the mouth that I say otherwise, who weren't even alive at the time? So it's actually easier to get away with than people realize. There's no independent press coverage, and we just have to trust the Nixon administration, right?
Right. So, in a way, what you're saying is that NASA's the front, the facade for this to take place, and
Yeah.
the
So if the people in the command center don't know, then it's really not NASA in and of itself faking the moon landing. If Republican Nixon approved it and Democratic Johnson filmed it, there's something above them, the whatever you want to call it, the evil people who run the world in the United States government who control both presidents.
okay.
I doubt if it was Johnson's idea to fake it, and I doubt if it was Nixon's idea to fake it, but they were compelled one way or another to fake it. So somebody's controlling them. This whole Republican Democrat, they would love for us to continually fight one another so we don't go after them. And the fact that both political parties participated in the faking of the moon landing is proof that that whole, Republican Democrat paradigm is a complete scam to distract people from the real corrupt people running the government.
Did the astronauts? Would you say that all of them were, for want of a better expression, in on it?
Well, according to Betty Grissom, she is the widow of the man who was going to be the first man to walk on the moon. I interviewed her for 4 hours. She asked that the interview not be in a funny thing happened on the way to the moon, but that I could put it in my book after she died. So I did. My book is interactive with about 20 video links, which you can see for free at Sibrel.com. I write a chapter, and if I talk about how there's space radiation that prevents us from going to the moon, I show a quick video of an expert from NASA saying so himself. And Betty Grissom told me that on January 26, 1967, her husband called her up from NASA and said, "Hon, for some strange reason, the CIA is all over the launch pad inspecting the equipment." He said, "I've been here for 8 years, never seen the CIA a single time. Why did they show up today?" The very next day, he's dead from faulty equipment that the CIA inspected 24 hours earlier. She told me that he was killed by the CIA because he was a whistleblower at NASA to such a degree that he was actually under Secret Service protection the day he died. Because a few weeks earlier, without permission, he took a bunch of reporters to the top of the rocket and he was preparing reports for Congress and the Senate about how they were a decade away, not to claim 2 years from going to the moon. With reporters at the top of the rocket, he affixed a lemon the size of a grapefruit, calling the Apollo rocket a piece of junk. And he was dead a few days later after receiving death threats from generals at the Pentagon themselves. So the government that was established by the Declaration of Independence, which said when any government becomes destructive of life and liberty, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it. Well, we know from Kennedy's administration, Operation Northwoods, the Pentagon thought it was a great idea to kill 200 Americans and blame it on Cuba. Now, why those people didn't go to jail for attempted murder, I don't know why. And then you have the Gulf of Tonkin, which killed millions of people, including over 58,000 Americans. No one seems to have a problem with that. And yet, for some reason, back in, I guess, 1772, if I'm not mistaken, the Boston Massacre killed a whopping 5 people.
Yeah.
And our founding fathers and mothers said, that's it. That's enough. Why is our country going along with the government killing their own people, and according to Betty Grissom, killing uncooperative Apollo astronauts, and somehow we think this is okay?
But
And no one does anything about it.
Talk to
That's
me.
why exposing the moon landing fraud and the subsequent murders would be the best way to get rid of this corruption.
Now, you have certainly done your best in terms of publicizing this. Talk to me about your encounter with Buzz Aldrin. Did he know who you were? Was he aware of your work, or was he just annoyed that you turned up at that Beverly Hills
Oh,
hotel?
no, we've met more than once before then. I did a follow up film called Astronauts Gone Wild that received its name because I got punched by one astronaut, kicked by another astronaut, threatened to be shot by another astronaut, threatened to be punched by another astronaut, and won when I showed them the fake footage of the crew of Apollo 11 pretending to be halfway to the moon. One of them kicked me from behind, started cursing, turned beet red. Where did you get this footage? Threw me out of his house, and we accidentally left a wireless microphone on him. And the camera operator, so I guess befuddled, he forgot to hit stop record. So while the astronaut and his son are in their house with the door closed, he forgets that he has a wireless microphone on, which is actually being recorded in the backseat of the rental car in his driveway. Where months later, when a transcript was done of the interview, we hear them say, "Do you want to call the CIA and have me whacked?" Now, why would an Apollo astronaut have the CIA in his Rolodex? Why would the Apollo astronauts all have top secret clearance? And why would some silly person who thinks the moon landings were filmed at Cannon Air Force Base be a threat to the CIA if they really went to the moon? Right? So the fact that they're threatening to have me killed by the CIA is proof that I'm right, because they would never have to do that if they really went. I mean, it's amazing how much proof there is that they didn't go, including their intentional destruction of all the Apollo equipment. One of the clips at Sibrel.com is an Apollo astronaut saying, "Yeah, after we went to the moon, we destroyed all the equipment and the telemetry data where the rocket was and all the original videotapes." Now, why would you do that if you really went to the moon? But that's exactly what you would do if you perpetrated a fraud. I mean, it just boggles the mind. The proof is right there out in the open that the moon missions were fake, and they still defend them because they know if the truth comes out, it will end corruption. Nothing will upset the world and Americans more than to know the moon landings were fake. 6 times they treated them like suckers, and that our national heroes are a bunch of traitors and liars. Don't we need to know the truth in order to make a better world and a better government? And we cannot keep sweeping this under the rug. You know, our founding fathers and mothers, they said that's enough because they believed in right and wrong. Now people are more concerned, whistleblowers in the government who don't say anything. They want to just protect their income, not realizing they're going to die anyway. I was even afraid to make this movie at one point, Sean. In fact, I turned it down. I started looking into it, the shadows intersecting, the weird behavior of the astronauts, the Soviets being more advanced. And I'm like, something doesn't look right. If I start looking into this and they did fake the moon landing, I'd be risking my life. Do I really want to do that for what Nixon did, right? When I was 4 years old. I don't think so. It wasn't until I read the Bible 5 times that I realized I'm going to die anyway. There is a judgment to come, and the faking of the moon landing is so much more important than if they had actually gone. And our founding fathers and mothers knew that. They weren't concerned if the truth was embarrassing, right? People in high places in the government, they know the moon missions are fake, but they're too concerned with what people think. Our founding fathers and mothers were concerned with what God thought, with what right and wrong is, right? At least, 15 people were killed because of the moon landing fraud. Well, that's 3 times as many who were killed during the Boston Massacre, and yet no one's doing anything about it. They need to be concerned about what God thinks and not what people think, and stop sweeping this under the rug. The faking of the moon landing was juvenile. Do you realize that? It's juvenile. Okay, we set a goal. We can't do it. I have an idea. Why don't we fake it, and anyone gets in our way, we'll kill them? That's a great idea. That just shows you how immature our leaders are. And to keep the lie a secret because it's embarrassing is also immature. How can we go forward unless we admit our mistakes? It will be so refreshing. So many people say they want to reform the government and they refuse to use the best tool to do so, which is to admit the moon landing fraud and to say, see, that's how bad it is. When you asked me, Sean, a few minutes ago, what was it like when I put in that tape? My heart was broken. I'm like, oh my gosh, they actually did fake the moon landing. How sad is that?
But what that does...
And that truth better be known, or we're going down the drain
absolutely.
fast.
But Bart, what you're also outlining here, and we haven't time to go into it, unfortunately, but what you're outlining, though, is the minute you unpick the moon landings, it unravels many, many other things in politics, in history, in society. Suddenly, all bets are off. Suddenly, the world that we thought we knew doesn't actually exist.
Well, good, because that world is corrupt. One of the news directors at NBC, one of them was going to expose it, and the other one was afraid to. He says it would cause a breakdown of the government. I'm looking, well, wait a minute. You're saying if we show a crime of the federal government that is so arrogant and ostentatious, it will bring an end to the corrupt government, and that's a bad thing?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Why not tell the truth and give everybody amnesty?
Absolutely.
They're going to face justice. They're going to face God. Forgive everybody. Forgive even homicide. That the truth is more important historically for the rest of humanity than to nitpick over the details.
Absolutely.
Give anybody complete federal amnesty and exile them to the island of their choice if they simply tell the truth about this or other crimes that the federal government has committed. Purge it out. We need to have a house cleaning, and this is the best way to do it.
Bart, unfortunately, we have come to the end of our time together. It's been absolutely fascinating, as I thought it would be. Tell people where they can find out more about you, where they can watch your film, and also find out more about your books and various other information freely available on this subject.
Yeah, I made a movie, cost about $1 million, called The Funny Thing Happened on the Way to the Moon. It showcases that footage. I wrote a book called Moon Man, which goes into the behind-the-scenes investigation, including the deathbed testimony of an eyewitness to the moon landing fraud. And I wrote a new book about a potential coming alien deception by the federal government. All of these videos and books, they're available at my website, which is Sibrel.com. That's S as in Sam, I, B as in boy, R-E-L, Sibrel.com.
For now, Bart, thank you so much for coming on Things Visible and Invisible.
Sure. Take care.
Thank you for joining us on another episode of Things Visible and Invisible. We're dedicated to uncovering phenomena that challenge our understanding of reality, from ancient enigmas and paranormal encounters to scientific anomalies and forgotten histories. If you enjoyed this journey into the mysterious and unexplained, please consider subscribing to our channel and hitting the notification bell to stay updated on future explorations. Have a personal experience or story that aligns with our investigations? We'd love to hear from you. Visit our website at tvi.show and reach out through our contact form. While we can't feature every submission, we review them all, and your story might be featured in an upcoming episode. To support our continued investigations, please consider becoming a Patreon supporter or channel member. Your contributions make these explorations possible and give you access to exclusive content, early releases, and monthly behind-the-scenes discussions with our team. Don't forget to check out our merch store. We've got everything from TVI-branded t-shirts and hoodies to stickers and coffee mugs, perfect for showing your support while keeping the mysteries close. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time as we continue to explore the things visible and invisible.